Hello guys, welcome to our channel AskPrep. Today's series is for 11th class biology. We will be studying chapter 17 breathing and exchange of gases in detail. We have also added important notes for your exam preparation. All the best for your exam. Starting with respiratory organs, different organisms exhibit various respiratory mechanisms to adapt to their environments. Below is a summary of some organisms and their respiratory organs. Organism respiratory organs. Terrestrial mammals lungs. Fish gills. Earthworms moist skin. Insects tracheal system, spiracles and trachea. Amphibians lungs, skin and buccopharyngeal cavity. Birds lungs and air sacs. Plants stomata and lenticels for gas exchange. Next is human respiratory system. The human respiratory system is a complex network of organs and structures that facilitate the exchange of gases between the body and the environment. It all starts with the external nostrils, which lead into the nasal cavity. Inside the nasal cavity, specialized cells secrete mucus, a slimy fluid that helps capture dust and other particles from the inhaled air, keeping the nasal passages moist and clean. The nasal cavity extends into the pharynx, a junction where the respiratory and digestive systems meet. The pharynx is divided into three sections: the oropharynx, nasopharynx, and laryngopharynx. Each section serves a specific purpose, such as allowing food to pass through, oropharynx, or facilitating airflow, nasopharynx. The glottis, located at the bottom of the nasopharynx, is protected by the epiglottis, a cartilaginous flap that prevents food from entering the windpipe or trachea during swallowing. The trachea is a thin-walled tube that runs in front of the esophagus and carries air to and from the lungs. Let's understand in detail.
So let's start doing by deep breathing. So take a deep breath in, hold and breathe out. Repeat again. Aren't you feeling fresh and energetic? But tell me, where does the air actually go when we breathe? You might say it goes to our lungs. Well, yes, it is correct. The air passes through the respiratory tract and then enters the lungs. So let's explore the features and the parts of the human respiratory system. The air enters the human body through nostrils, which then passes through the nasal cavity. The air is filtered by a specialized hair-like structure in the nasal cavity called cilia. The cells of the nasal cavity secrete mucus, which helps to trap the dust particles and blocks it from moving ahead. The nasal cavity also provides warmth and adds some moisture to the air. The nasal cavity has specialized sensory cells that are sensitive to smell. And yes, that is the reason why our nose is a sense organ. The nasal cavity opens into a much wider cavity called a pharynx. The pharynx is a common passage for air and food. It is easily visible when you open your mouth wide. Yes, the reason behind the tongue. Has this ever occurred to you that while having food, you cough because the food accidentally entered the other pipe? Well, yes, this never happens otherwise. This is because the pharynx has a cartilaginous flap-like structure called epiglottis. This epiglottis closes the windpipe when we swallow the food. It prevents the entry of the food in the windpipe. So, while swallowing, if epiglottis is partially closed weak off, followed by pharynx, is a region called larynx, the voice box. The larynx in males is often seen protruding out. This is called the Adam's apple from here. From here, the air passes through a 4-inch long tube-like structure called trachea. The trachea is often referred to as the windpipe. If you carefully observe the structure, there are many C-shaped cartilaginous rings present on the trachea. What do you think is the function of these rings? These rings prevent the windpipe from collapsing. Close to the lungs, the trachea or the windpipe divides into two tubes called the bronchi. The single tube is called bronchus. Each of these tubes enters their respective lungs. On entering their lungs, each bronchus further divides into secondary bronchus, which further divides into finer tubes called tertiary bronchi, and much finer bronchiole by repeated branching. The bronchioles ultimately enters in a cluster of tiny air sac-like structure called the alveoli. They are often referred to as the air sacs. The alveoli are surrounded with blood vessels. They are the actual site for gaseous exchange. Now taking about the respiratory organ, lungs. Lungs are a pair of air-filled spongy organ located in the chest cavity. Carefully observe the size of the lung. Are the two of the same size? The right lung is larger than the left lung. Can you think why it is so? It provides space to accommodate the heart. Though centrally located, the base of the heart is slightly tilted towards the left, and this space is provided by the left lung. The lungs are protected by a rib cage. Here is a question for you to think about. Why does their rib cage have a cage-like structure with gaps in between, and why is it not a closed sealed structure? Think of it and share your response in the common words below. So this was a session giving you a brief idea of the human respiratory system. It comprises of the respiratory tract and lungs.
Mechanism of respiration. Breathing involves two phases. Inspiration, inhalation, the diaphragm contracts, increasing lung volume, lowering pressure inside the lungs, allowing air to flow in. Expiration, exhalation, the diaphragm relaxes, lung volume decreases, pressure increases, pushing air out. Muscles, including the intercostal muscles and extra-abdominal muscles, help in deep breathing. Normal respiratory rate is about 12 to 16 breaths per minute, with an average airflow of 10 liters per minute. Diagram showing mechanism of respiration. Respiratory volumes and capacities play an important role in understanding lung function and respiratory health. Here are some key definitions and measurements related to respiratory volumes and capacities. Tidal volume, TV air inhaled exhaled in a normal breath, tilde 500 ml. Inspiratory reserve volume, IRV additional air inhaled after a normal breath, 2000 to 3000 ml. Expiratory reserve volume, ERV additional air exhaled after normal exhalation, tilde 1100 ml. Residual volume, RV air remaining in lungs after forced exhalation, tilde 1100-1200 ml. Pulmonary capacity terms include inspiratory capacity, ICTV plus IRV. Expiratory capacity, ECTV plus ERV. Vital capacity, VC-IRV plus ERV plus TV. Total lung capacity, TLC-IRV plus ERV plus TV plus RV. Now let's understand mechanism in detail.
In previous video, we studied the different parts of the human respiratory system. We ended the video with the question. We will find the answer to that in this video. Let's begin. Have you observed the movement of our chest region or belly when we breathe? That slight inward and outward movement. Why does that happen? Well, breathing is a physical mechanism of taking in air and exhaling it out of the body. This process involves two main steps. The first step is inhalation or inspiration. This is a physical mechanism of taking in air. The diaphragm is a dome-shaped muscular tissue that separates the chest cavity and the abdominal cavity. During inhalation, the diaphragm flattens, making more space for the lungs in the chest cavity. The ribs further move upwards and outwards. It is due to this the ribs are not sealed bones but a cage-like structure having gaps to provide space to expand these. All this increases the volume of the lungs, decreasing its pressure. The decreased pressure draws air inside the lungs. The outside air is at a higher pressure, hence rushes inside the body to equalize the same. The reverse situation occurs when we breathe out. The diaphragm relaxes and returns back to its normal dome shape. The ribs contract. As a result, the volume inside the lungs reduces, increasing the pressure inside. The pressure outside is now low. The air inside the lungs now rushes outside to equalize the pressure. Thus, we breathe out. This process of breathing out air is called exhalation or expiration. Our lungs can hold a maximum of 6000 ml of air anytime, which is called a total lung capacity. That's quite a number, isn't it? Now tell me, is breathing a voluntary or involuntary movement? Can we control it? Let's try. Hold your breath. Oof, that's difficult. The breathing movements are normally not under our control, or well, that is, they are involuntary movement. But to some extent, one can cautiously control the rate of breathing. Did you know that a normal human adult's breathing rate is 12 to 18 breaths per minute, but a newborn breathes 60 times per minute? The composition of the air that we inhale and exhale too. We often say that we breathe in oxygen and release out carbon dioxide. So thus, the air has only two components. Is it practically possible for us to filter out and inhale only oxygen? No, right? The air that we breathe in has other constituents as well, but the proportion of oxygen is comparatively more. Hence, it is oxygen rich. Similarly, the air that we exhale out too has some amount of oxygen, but it is now carbon dioxide rich. So now we know that there is a lot happening within the body when we simply breathe, but how is carbon dioxide added to the blood?
Here is the recap, labeled diagram of trachea. After the trachea, the air passages divide into two bronchi, with each bronchus leading to one lung. Within the lungs, these bronchi further branch out into smaller tubes known as bronchioles, which extend throughout the lung tissue. The bronchioles eventually divide into numerous tiny ducts called alveolar ducts. At the end of these ducts are clusters of thin-walled air sacs called alveoli. These alveoli resemble bunches of grapes, with each cluster of alveoli known as an infundibulum. Labeled diagram of alveoli, tiny air sacs where gas exchange occurs. Alveoli resemble grape-like clusters called infundibulum. Nasal cavity. Air enters through the external nostrils, where mucus traps dust and moistens the air. Pharynx. The passageway for both food and air, divided in two. Nasopharynx. Air passage. Oropharynx. Passage for food. Laryngopharynx. Leads to the larynx. Larynx. Voice box supported by cartilage, including the thyroid cartilage, Adam's apple, containing vocal cords for sound production. Bronchi and bronchioles. The trachea splits into two bronchi, which lead to the lungs, further branching into bronchioles that carry air into the alveoli. Lungs, enclosed by the pleura, a double-layered membrane, they facilitate gas exchange with the help of pleural fluid to reduce friction during breathing. Next is gas exchange. Gas exchange occurs in the alveoli, where oxygen diffuses into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out. This process relies on concentration gradients and is influenced by factors like membrane thickness and gas solubility. Partial pressure of oxygen, PO2, in atmospheric air is tilde 160 mmHg, while that of carbon dioxide, PCO2, is much lower at tilde 0.3 mmHg. In the alveoli, oxygen diffuses into the bloodstream due to higher PO2, and carbon dioxide moves out due to lower PCO2. The process of gas exchange, particularly the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide across the alveolar membrane, is facilitated by several factors. Firstly, the structure of the diffusion membrane plays a critical role. It consists of the squamous epithelial cells lining the alveoli, the endothelial cells of the capillaries surrounding the alveoli, and the basement membrane between these layers. This membrane is incredibly thin, measuring less than a millimeter in total thickness, which enables efficient gas exchange. Moreover, the partial pressure gradient of gases drives the diffusion process. Despite the lower partial pressure of oxygen compared to carbon dioxide, the efficiency of gas exchange is high due to the large surface area of the alveoli and the rich blood supply in the pulmonary capillaries. Physiological variables such as concentration gradients, blood flow, and ventilation perfusion matching also contribute to efficient gas exchange. These variables ensure that oxygen is delivered to tissues in proportion to their metabolic needs and that carbon dioxide is efficiently removed from the bloodstream. Overall, the coordinated interplay of these factors optimizes the exchange of gases across the alveolar membrane, ensuring that oxygen is delivered to tissues for cellular respiration while carbon dioxide is effectively eliminated from the body. Gas transportation, oxygen, carried primarily by hemoglobin in red blood cells, forming oxyhemoglobin. Carbon dioxide, transported in the blood mainly as bicarbonate ions, 70%, while some bind to hemoglobin as carbaminohemoglobin, 20 to 25%, and a small percentage is dissolved in plasma. Let's understand in detail.
Partial pressure of gases is the key behind their exchange in the body. This is what we have learned so far. But is the process as easy as it seems for us? From what we have studied so far, the process is simple. RBC grabbed the oxygen that diffuses in the bloodstream from alveoli and pass it to the cells. Inversely, carbon dioxide gets in the RBCs to bind with the hemoglobin and gets transported to the lungs. But trust me, the processes are not that simple. Any idea how the binding takes place? How do the molecules bind to hemoglobin? What happens after the binding, and what happens when the bonds are broken to deliver the respective molecules at the respective sites? Let's answer all these queries in this video. Let's begin with what happens in the alveoli. Here the partial pressure of oxygen is greater than that of carbon dioxide. Thus, the carbon dioxide molecules are made to leave the hemoglobin and oxygen occupies the place. Each oxygen binds to the ion component, that is the Hem group of the hemoglobin molecule. Thus, a single hemoglobin can usually carry 4 oxygen molecules. The binding of oxygen to hemoglobin helps in the formation of a complex called a oxyhemoglobin, but this complex formation is not very easy. Factors like temperature, hydrogen ion concentration, and also the concentration of carbon dioxide molecules around influence the binding of the oxygen. Along with this, there is one more factor that accounts for the binding. It's the structure of the binding site. We know that the structure of a molecule changes as it binds to any other atom or molecule. So here, when the ion group binds to the carbon dioxide, the shape of the protein changes reversibly. Now when the oxygen is about to bind, the change of shape has to be reversed. So this is one more influential factor for the binding of oxygen. After all the factors are proved, oxygen molecules bind to the ion group and form the complex of oxyhemoglobin. This is then taken to the cells where the oxygen dissociates due to increase in the partial pressure compared to that in the cells. The cells on the other hand have a higher partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Now imagine a scenario where the partial pressure of oxygen is lower in cells and higher in the RBC, and at the same time the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high in the cells and extremely less in the RBCs. It's obvious that the oxygen molecules will dissociate and get into the cells. Thus, the oxyhemoglobin structure will get disrupted and the hemoglobin protein will again get altered. Now it's all set to receive carbon dioxide molecules for which it has equal affinity. The binding of carbon dioxide leads to the formation of another complex named the carbaminohemoglobin. Is then carried to the lungs with the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is still lower, and here the scene is totally reversed. Now the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is higher than that of oxygen in the RBCs, in contrast to the cell as seen earlier, and the partial pressure of oxygen is lower in the RBCs compared to the lungs. So the exchange and complex formation takes place once again. This is how the gases are transported. So are oxygen and carbon dioxide always carried in the form of these two complexes throughout the body? Well, not exactly. There's a lot more to know in this. A lot of oxygen, approximately more than 95%, is transported by the RBCs. The remaining amount is transported by the plasma as oxygen dissolves in it easily. And the story of carbon dioxide is totally different. There is an interesting twist here. Hardly 20 to 23% of carbon dioxide is carried in the form of hemoglobin. Hold on, did I just say around 23%? Only? Then what about the remaining amount? How is so much amount of carbon dioxide transported then? Well, carbon dioxide is mainly transported through the plasma. This occurs in two forms. Around 7% is carried as dissolved solution in the plasma, and the remaining 70% is carried in the form of bicarbonate. The conversion of carbon dioxide into bicarbonates is carried out by the enzyme carbonic anhydrase. This enzyme converts carbon dioxide and water to give bicarbonates and hydrogen ions. And where does this happen? The conversion and the transports are all carried out in the RBC itself. That's right. The enzyme is present in the RBC and converts the carbon dioxide and water reversibly in bicarbonate and hydrogen ions. So the majority of the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonates, but we do not exhale bicarbonates. So how does this system work? How is carbon dioxide made available during exhalation? Well, the simple answer is reconversion. The bicarbonate and the hydrogen ion produced are converted back to carbon dioxide and water as the RBCs reach the alveoli. This is performed by the same enzyme carbonic anhydrase. In a nutshell, majority of oxygen is transported by binding to the hemoglobin protein. On the other hand, carbon dioxide is transported mostly in the form of bicarbonates in the RBCs, and the remaining in the form of hemoglobin in the RBC and dissolved carbon dioxide in the plasma. This is how transport of the tube gases is carried out. Now if we plot a graph of partial pressure of oxygen against the percent saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, then a sigmoid curve is obtained. This is called the oxygen dissociation curve. And is this really very useful? Well, it has a significant role to play in the study of several factors that affect breathing, but we will discuss about this graph in detail in the higher grades. For now, let's get back to respiration and learn some more interesting fact about it.
Digestive glands. The glands that are a part of the alimentary canal and aid in the digestion of dietary ingredients are referred to as digestive glands. The pancreas, liver, and salivary glands are among these glands. Salivary glands. They are the digestive glands that result in the secretion of saliva and are found in the oral cavity. In humans, salivary glands are three in pairs. 1. Parotid glands. 2. Sublingual gland. 3. Submandibular or submaxillary glands. Disorders of the digestive system, constipation, indigestion, diarrhea, vomiting, and jaundice are among the prevalent digestive system illnesses. Jaundice, the yellowing of the skin, eyes, and mucous membranes is caused by the buildup of bile pigments in the blood. Vomiting. This happens when the stomach's contents are forced out of the mouth due to a blockage in the digestive tract or reverse peristalsis. It is a reflex that is managed by the vomiting center located in the brain's medulla oblongata. As soon as nausea sets in, vomiting happens. Diarrhea. The symptoms of diarrhea, which are brought on by improper water absorption, are often watery stools. This lowers the amount of food absorbed and causes an irregular frequency of bowel movements as well as a watery fecal discharge. Thanks for watching the video. We will drop the notes in the description of this video. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. See you in the next video, and all the best for your exam.